Welcome to Community Insight Broadcast. I am your host, Reverend Dr. Rodney Coles. We're here bringing information to our community, and today we have a special guest, and I first thank God she come a long distance to be with us today, and we just thank God for the protection of her being here as well as our safety getting back. And today we have Miss Michelle. Miss Michelle, welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Pastor Cole. I appreciate it. I'm honored to be here and share a little bit about us.
Okay. Now, Michelle, I know you do a whole lot, and then we only have a short amount of time to get everything through, you know. So we want to know, you are with the North Carolina Council of Churches. If you can just give us just a little bit of brief, what is the North Carolina Council of Churches for those who's first time knowing about what you guys, who you are?
Yeah, sure. So like you said, I'm part of the North Carolina Council of Churches, and specifically I'm on the Partners in Health and Wholeness team that we have as an initiative at the Council of Churches. So the Council of Churches is actually 85 years old. In 2020, we celebrated our 85th anniversary. Had a lot planned, but unfortunately, things happened and things were derailed. But we did have quite a few events online, and our Partners in Health and Wholeness program that we call PHW just celebrated 10 years, actually,
Wow.
In 2020. But the Council of Churches as a whole, we address all sorts of faith and justice issues through the lens of Christianity. And Partners in Health and Wholeness specifically, we originally were founded to address the preventable diseases that impact thousands of people in North Carolina every year. There are thousands of people that die from preventable diseases each year in North Carolina. And originally, we focused on addressing our four cornerstones, as we called them. So we focused on tobacco cessation, healthy eating, physical activity, and mental health. And then as we continued to work with our faith communities, and really credit to our regional coordinators at the time for meeting people like you, talking to congregants, and listening to the real concerns and the deepening issues in the health movement, we expanded those four cornerstones to also include healthy aging and the overdose crisis. And then we have also expanded and deepened our work in mental health. So now we have these 6 focus areas that include the tobacco cessation, healthy eating, physical activity, and mental health, and also healthy aging and the overdose crisis. So really PHW aims to address these 6 issue areas by creating tools and resources and support for faith communities across the state interested in dedicating work and time.
Well, first I want to, I thank God whoever was the visionary of this here, 85 years. That's truly called leadership, where you leave a deposit for the next generation to keep on taking it. I've been a part of the North Carolina Council of Churches, got to be at least 6 years, 5 years in between. And I am amazed on the work that you guys do and how you help with the health and holiness, and just to get to meet you and to meet Jessica, I kind of try to kidnap her, keep her there.
Don't we all?
And the work you do and how you do it to help with the faith base, because we as a clergy, and I speak from my heart and my opinion, that we may have a lot of understanding of the theology of that, but we go to John as it talks about health and talks about the body, and we could talk about that, but it's the body, soul, and spirit. But to have a organization, a nonprofit as you guys who have helped these churches to understand the health part, and also help them to put inside their churches a little program to continue to help. And that is so important. And you, like I said, you started out with 4, but you're now at 6, and, smoking that sick of those tobaccos, and speaking about, the area that we're dealing with now, because we are now dealing with this pandemic, the coronavirus, as I said to folks last year, because when the ball drops for 21 doesn't mean it's over.
Right.
This is a long period of time, and there's a lot happening with mental illness and the mental health part. Our police department joined on. I've seen our police department here got involved and we have mobile crisis, and I'm so glad to hear, because I know that hits some areas, and these children at home who are studying being in school and social distance from their friends, and I do sit on the advisory board with the Boys and Girls Club, and they're doing their best to keep social media going and keeping these children engaged.
Yeah.
So it means a lot. So I do thank those who put that vision together and the teamwork that you guys have, and the leadership is so good that you're moving forward. So when you speak about the health and wellness, could you kind of explain to some of these clergy might be watching this program what exactly, right into the nail of that how you help them bring that kind of program to their churches? How can they be more a part of that?
Well, I wanted to make sure to just give my team a shout out if I
Please
can.
do.
Each of those, when I think about PHW and when someone asks me who PHW is, my instinct is to talk about my team. I think that the people that we have on staff and the time that they dedicate to their focus areas is really at the heart of PHW and what we do. So I wanted to mention, like you said, Reverend Jessica Stokes. She actually told me to give a shout out to a lot of her Greenville network and friends. She misses being out here. She lived out here for a couple years, moved to Wilmington for a couple years. Now she's in Durham, but she's really still serving so much of Eastern North Carolina. So she is really focused on addressing statewide mental health advocacy and education. And more recently, she's actually related to COVID and like you're talking about isolation and trauma. And she has been working on a series called Trauma-Informed Care for Faith Communities. So in 2020, she developed a trauma-informed toolkit that can be found on our website, and it goes along with 2 of the events we held in 2020, part of our Sacred Conversations series. So she's been working really hard to deepen that mental health access and education for faith communities. And especially now that, a lot of the churches are not meeting in person, I think it's a great time potentially for faith leaders and lay leaders to be reflecting on what kind of environment, what kind of culture we can invite our congregants back into when we're in person again. I also wanted to give a shout out to Elizabeth Brewington, our overdose response coordinator. Like you're saying, COVID has made the overdose crisis even worse, and she has been addressing that through harm reduction practices. Now, I wasn't very familiar with the term harm reduction before I started talking to her about it, and she was learning about it. So for anyone listening who may not know what harm reduction is, the best example that I was given is, when we're driving in the car, for example, we put a seatbelt on because it reduces the probability that something will harm us. So that sort of mentality approaching overdose is really rooted in dignity, and in my opinion, I think it's making sure that the people experiencing addiction or people who are dealing with the overdose crisis, they're the ones shaping how to respond to it. They're the ones coming up with the solutions, and that is harm reduction, the harm reduction approach. So Elizabeth as well is doing such good work. We have Nicole Johnson in Winston-Salem. Yes, she is focused on denominational support. So her background is the UMC, the United Methodist Church, but she has been really essential in connecting PHW with denominational specific resources. So we actually just did a 2-part, actually 3-part UMC series with Jessica, Trauma-Informed Care for Faith Communities. But I think that there's something really quite special about making and tailoring resources to a denomination that shares the same vocabulary, same denominational history, theology. So she has been instrumental in connecting us with denominational resources across the state.
Wow.
And then I also wanted to say, I know there's quite a few of us, but Reverend Karen Richardson Dunn, she's in Asheville, also works statewide.
Wow.
So we do span the state geographically. But she is focused on healthy aging, which the more and more I talk to her about it, the more I realize how essential it is to be addressing healthy aging, again, from a place of dignity and of respect, because especially now as we see COVID impacting the elderly community, people in nursing homes, my grandparents, in addition to the devastation that COVID has done to our communities, there is an element of loneliness and isolation that so many of our elderly population are dealing with. And she was very intentional about inviting Caleb Pusey, who is a spiritually integrated psychotherapist in Western North Carolina, to partner with us to do 2-part series on the spirituality of loneliness in life's second chapter. Which, loneliness and isolation is a problem before COVID, if we're honest, but it has really just grown since COVID happened, and we're all indoors, quarantined, socially distanced. I want to say that's it, but I would be remiss to not say our fearless leader, Christine Purnell. We call her Chris. She is the manager of all the day-to-day operations and really in charge of developing our future program. And then Lindsay Barth, who's our communications associate, takes care of all of our really fabulous newsletters, social media campaigns. Right now, we're actually doing a Black History Month social media campaign honoring Black community leaders who have impacted health, both in history and currently. We're really excited about that campaign. And I guess a little bit about myself, just to talk about my role on our team. I'm the program coordinator. So as we'll talk about, I'm sure in a little bit, the collaborative program that we have, the mini grant program that we have, I love, enjoy, really cherish the opportunity to be able to support health leads, faith leaders, churches who are interested in making the commitment through our collaborative pledge and applying for a mini grant to help fund their health ministry projects.
I'm going to say this, and I don't mean to say this on the broadcast. The North Carolina Council of Churches, y'all guys like this big family, and that is so good because you're not the only one. Every time I meet y'all and talk with y'all, y'all like a big, happy family, and it's like it's not a job. It's a family that has the heart and work together, and that is so important. I think that some employers that may be in that leadership, they don't know that it's not about the job. It's about us building a relationship and how we work together. And y'all guys do that. Y'all do that all the time. Even when you're not there, it's just that. And I just thank God and give praise to the leadership there because that's how you are. Y'all that way everywhere you go on that leadership. Because some people, a person never quit their job. They quit their bosses. They get tired of them, because either they're, excuse my French, either they're just ignorant of understanding how to treat people and not treating them nice. And when you treat your employee nice, it's nothing but good fruit produced out of that. When you treat your employee like you don't care and it's a better word to use, emasculate them, it doesn't show compassion. And y'all guys is like that. I got to get off that topic because we got a few minutes left. But I just wanted to say, for y'all guys, thank y'all for what you do because that's the kind of love you guys have in helping people. And y'all work together like a team, like a football team. Like y'all like really work together. And that is so good to know about. Yeah. That's how we supposed to have an employee. That means the leadership. Jennifer, the leadership. Make sure we all work together. And that's where the love come at. Yeah. But I know I got a few minutes to talk.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention, I'm glad that the mentor thing is so important, and it's just, I didn't know you had the toolbox, and that's good to know, because we need to have that, especially when we are dealing with the pandemic and understanding, we still dealing with those who not getting the vaccination and those who does. And so even we have a meeting with interfaith clergy, so they have education, and there's different, minority would not get it, and there's a lot of because they don't have no knowledge on that. And that's a story, that's a conversation I'll be working with the doctors on that. That's not your kind of conversation.
Well, I mean, and part of our focus in 2021 is really to recognize that, to your point of just accessibility and education, making sure that it's reaching all the corners of North Carolina, realizing and recognizing that even if as individuals we choose healthier lifestyles, there's only so much that can be done if we're not addressing the inequities in our healthcare system. And to that point, we actually partnered with the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services recently on 2 events. One of those was titled the Role of the Church in COVID-19, but more recently it was an information session on the vaccine. So if for anyone that missed it, we have that recording on our YouTube page. And I was personally very interested in being an organizer, but also just a participant on this webinar, because a lot of my questions around the vaccine were answered. And the leadership at the Department of Health and Human Services was more than willing to share their contact information for anyone who might have questions or might be interested in follow-up educational materials or anything like that. So that is just a couple examples of our events that we've held in the past year, and all of those events that we've had are recorded and on our YouTube page so that everyone can access it at any time if they're interested.
Well, for just a brief minute, if you could look at your camera, could you tell them how to get on your website and get information?
Yes. So our website is healthandwholeness.org. Our YouTube, if you want to look up Partners in Health and Wholeness. And I also just want to put out there my email. If you have any questions, feedback, concerns, my email is phwinfo@ncchurches.org. And on all social media, we're on Facebook and in Twitter if you look up Partners in Health and Wholeness.
Thank you so much, because they're going to know how they get that YouTube.
Yes, definitely.
How can they get to that YouTube channel? I wanted to just speak a little bit about, and you're doing a training for our area here in a virtual. I believe that's going to be the 11th. I'm not sure on the date.
Right I don't have it in front of me.
Okay, don't worry about it. Okay. And to speak to the clergy, because we want to make sure that they understanding what the health and holiness and how could they apply for this mini grant and how does it work on the procedure. So I'm going to let you go ahead and explain to them how will they be able to do that.
Yes, so we have a collaborative pledge that we invite churches and faith communities to submit. Now, most of the time, I'm the one that's communicating with our health lead. So to define our health lead, that tends to be our point of contact person at the church. And sometimes it's the clergy person, sometimes it's not. We like to hope that it's not the clergy person because we know how busy faith leaders are in churches. But anyway, I am in communication with the health lead, and we invite the health lead to fill out a collaborative pledge, which for us is a sign of a commitment to health and wholeness to your church community and to us, and it's a way for both of us to be holding each other accountable. And also, when you submit the collaborative pledge, it automatically includes you in our newsletters and all of our email correspondence. You will find out about all of our upcoming events. And a lot of that one-on-one support from our associate directors, like I mentioned, Karen, Nicole, Jessica. And once the collaborative pledge is submitted, then you're eligible for a mini grant. Now, that mini grant is eligible once a year, and the individual mini grant is for up to $1,000. And that $1,000 can go towards any of the 6 focus areas that I mentioned earlier. Any projects or initiatives that are maybe beginning or expanding around those health areas, we want to be able to help financially support you, make sure that's expanding and really making a difference in your community. And an additional mini grant opportunity that is relatively new, we actually launched it in 2020, is our community mini grant opportunity. And that is offered to any project where 3 churches or more are coming together and working to address a shared need in the community. So an example of that is in Franklin County. I don't know how many churches, but on the application, 3 churches came together and saw a need to put together a food distribution center. So what was really neat about that is the 3 churches are different denominations. They're geographically in the same community, and one of the churches is providing the space. Another church is providing the majority of the food, and then the third church is providing a lot of the manpower. And so these 3 churches, different denominations, are coming together to make the shared community happier, a healthier space. And in addition to the food distribution, they added blood pressure checks and an educational component where they were dropping healthy eating tips and education in the bags of the food distribution. I just think it was a really great example in 2020 for collaboration between denominational churches and also in a geographical area. So that is our community mini grants. And just to offer a couple other examples, just for our individual mini grants, I mean, really, the span of projects that we fund is very wide, and we're very open to new ideas. But a couple examples include community gardens, walking trails, mental health first aid trainings, and an example of one that we funded last year that I thought was really neat is a seed starter kit that was sent home with the youth through the youth group. Kids would take home with them a pot, some soil, some seeds to grow their own herbs and vegetables at home.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And they were asked to be kind of writing these blogs about how it's going, what you're learning. And I just thought it was such a beautiful way of connecting education with an hands-on activity, and they were sharing some of those pictures and those blog posts on their social media so the rest of the church could see and hear about how that was going. I just thought that was a beautiful project.
Well, I like that.
I know.
That's something, I never heard that one before,
Yeah.
but that's really good. I love the idea because the key you said is with churches is because there's churches may can give the space. It's another church may have the volunteers.
Yes.
And I love the idea is they wanted to help the community of helping with food bags and stuff like that. This is the way y'all come together because, you know, it's amazing. I there's so many churches. It took a while for me to kind of connect with a lot of churches. And
I'm sure.
In North Carolina, not the only area. But you won't believe that they won't connect to each other. We next door to each other, and we look at the parking lot, and you look at my parking lot, but we're not collaborating. But we may do. Yeah, he's the next door church. But it's so good to see these churches together, and that's why the name Churches Outreach Network started, was bringing the churches, us together as outreaches, networking together. And I like that part there, that the church can collaborate and they can all apply for that grant. One person is one leader now. It's not 555. Let's don't get it twisted.
Right.
It's one, if you collaborate on a project that's kind of helping the community, you're working together and you're like Peedin gardens. But we also let them know that you cannot buy a platinum TV to put on your wall and say, well, we're going to do it through Zoom. No, we can't do that.
That is true. Very true.
Maybe a treadmill, maybe some bullets, and they could just chop up the onions or the tomatoes, and But yeah, and so, but also I love the idea about it because I have seen so many churches, and I've been with this about 5 years, give and take. The churches I know, the program, the food tasting, I learned a lot. I didn't know a lot about stuff until they taught me about it. I'm still learning. I learned about wood last week.
Me too.
But and it's so good for them to have this program that can help the churches, and then there's a lot of resources you guys offer. See, the purpose of this broadcast, that we have this broadcast, and we want to thank Henry Hinton to allow us to do this, that we can get the information out to the people. It's not about the Children of God in Christ Church. It's not about Churches Outreach Network. It's about the wholeness of getting this information out. Now, let me ask another question. They probably asked this question. Do you need to have a 501(c) to apply for this?
So we actually specifically do not offer funds to nonprofit organizations, and it has been difficult in the past because there are so many really wonderful nonprofit organizations who are faith-based, but our grants are specifically for churches. And other faith communities, but specifically not nonprofit organizations. It's a great question. We do get that quite often. Yeah. Okay. And I don't know if I mentioned, just to make sure, the community mini grant is for up to $5,000, and that's once a year as well. I just wanted to make sure that it's a little bit more than the $1,000, and for that reason, we have fewer of those. But if anyone is interested in the community mini grant, reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to you about that and make sure your application is as strong as possible for that. Okay.
Yeah, and so it doesn't do with nonprofit, but do the churches need to have a 501(c)? No.
No.
That's the question, to make sure, because they get caught up in understanding that they had to have that, but it's a church that a church is looking to extend their health program.
Yes, their health ministry.
The health ministry.
Yes.
All right, and this is a way to help extend it, and they can contact you. So we have a webinar coming up, so
we do.
And that webinar, is just going to go out so they can know. That's any question they have, they're going to be able to ask you then. So we give them a little leeway to ask the questions. Michelle, anything you want to say before we close out? Any last thing you want to say to them? At least give them your information again on the broadcast, and I will go ahead and close us out.
Okay, yeah, thank you for having me. Again, if there are any questions or feedback or concerns or interest in the collaborative pledge or our mini grant opportunities, my email is phwinfo@ncchurches.org, and our website is healthandwholeness.org. And I'm very excited to be teaching and learning with you all and teaching and learning from you all as well.
Again, we thank you, Michelle, for being on the broadcast. Thank y'all for listening. There's a webinar coming up. Please go to CUN2015.org to know about the webinar. She will be speaking. And as I close out, I just want to say a special thank you to all the emergency workers, the teachers, the hospital, people working over the clock, all the volunteers. I just want to thank you and give my appreciation of the work that you're doing. They're dealing with this pandemic. That some of you are not home with your wife or your family or your husband, and you're out there. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. And I'm praying and I'm seeking that we could do something, that we can have an appreciation day in Pitt County for all of y'all, where we could do something for all of y'all. Thank you for those out there. God bless. We see you at our next broadcast.